everybody, I'm Joey.
And I'm Chris.
All right, and today we are taking a look at Lords of Ragnarok.
This is a pretty anticipated follow-up to Lords of Hellas from Awakened Realms.
Yep, and Awakened Realms, of course, their miniatures are incredible.
And you said the word miniatures, and instantly several people watching this are like, oh, why is Chris in this review?
Right, so I pulled him in. No, actually, Chris was very excited to play this. He wanted to give this a try.
I was. I've not played Lords of Hellas.
Okay.
I've been interested, but then several people said, well, I might as well wait till Ragnarok comes out. And so I did. So this is my first dive into it. I've played very few other Awakened Realms games, but they tend to be very exciting and bombastic, but rules heavy.
Yes, they seem to have flaws that may show up in this as well. So, and we are reviewing Lords of Ragnarok as itself, not as, you know, how it compares to Lords of Hellas and all that stuff. We're looking at this as the game itself. Yep. So, all right, so before we get into that, now again, we're going to do a rules teach. And like Chris mentioned, any Awakened Realms game are so rules heavy.
Yeah, so this is not going to be a comprehensive rules teach that you do by any means. If people say, well, you didn't mention this part, don't worry, like we played it all. But we're going to give you a short kind of idea of what the game is like.
Yeah, so this is pretty much just to show you how the gameplay is not going into gameplay at all, because there's a lot that goes into this game. So, so a quick flyby overview. This is pretty much how the game is played. Okay, so we are set up for Lords of Ragnarok. We're set up for 2 players here. Now, this is going to be a very high-level overview, so I'm not going to go into a lot of rules at all. I'm just going to kind of show you pretty much a really high-level overview of how the game is played. First off, you can see it's a very large game, so I am zoomed in here on the board. So pretty much it's an area control style game that is won by ending through one of 4 different ways, which we'll get into those 4 in-game triggers later. But first off, I'm going to take you through an average player's turn. Okay, so the first phase of the turn is the prayer phase. The prayer phase is you can send a priest, which are these little guys right here, to a monument, and that enables you to bump up your stats, and you can also do a rune forging, which is grabbing the rune in an area. Second is the hero phase, and then you get to heal a hero, and the hero is going to be your guy here, just like this. Let's see if I can show him, see if we can zoom in on him. Ooh, I don't know if we can or not. But he's going to be your guy with the base there, and you can also move the hero or move your Drakkar, which is your ship. Third is going to be the rune action. The rune actions are these runes that you just picked up and put on your board from the foraging action. And there are different types of rune actions. You're going to have a whole little sheet of them. And those cost 1, 2, or 3 runes. They can do different things like bump your attributes, control a monster, or even draw combat cards. So that is your rune action. That's a third one. Now, fourth is your maneuver action. Maneuver is how you kind of move across the board. That is, you get to activate an army, and you can move it or increase its value. And if you don't have an army on the board, you can recruit one instead and bring an army onto the board. Your armies are these little guys right here. See if we can focus on this guy. Oh, I don't think it's going to let me focus. But these are your little armies right there. Okay, then finally, number 5, we're getting the special actions. And that's kind of where the heart of this happens, on this action wheel over here. You're going to notice on this action wheel, there are 6 different areas that you can do. Okay, so here is the action wheel right here, and these are where all the special actions take place. And you're going to place your marker on one of these areas and activate that. I'm going to go through them very quickly on what they do. First off, right here we have Jotunheim, that is build a temple, and that is pretty much just drop a temple down in one of your regions. That can take one. Monsters is going to be hunt monsters. Usurp is going to be, is if your hero is somewhere, he can take control of that region if he has the attributes to do so. Also, you have got prepare. Prepare right here, you can do different things like increase the value of your army, you can draw combat cards, you can gain runes, heal injuries, so that's prepare right there. Then you've got mobilize. And mobilize is you get to activate all your armies on the board to get to move them and things. And then you've got reinforce right here. Reinforce is you get to bring a new army onto the board from the sea or from somewhere else to kind of increase the number of armies that you do have on the board. And the final thing you can do here is you can build a monument. Now, building a monument are these huge monuments that you're going to pray at over here. So I'm going to go ahead. Now, one thing, they go to build a monument. Build a monument is the way you're going to refresh this. Because if you have your different tokens at all these spots, you can't do the same thing twice. So you have to refresh that, and to kind of refresh that is when you go to the build a monument phase. And that, a couple of other things happen when you activate that. Okay, so you have activated the build a monument. First off, you're going to build the next level of your chosen monuments. The monuments are these guys right here. Notice this guy just has his base and then the first part done. You're going to add to that. That is also going to increase what the monument can give you when you go to the prayer phase. Then you're also going to check the Ragnarok requirements, and those are right over here. They're going to be symboled right here on the side of the board, and you're going to see if enough of those are finished to trigger Ragnarok. Then everyone's going to remove their priest from all monuments, just like this. And then remove all the control marks from the action wheel, and you also recharge any artifact cards you do have. Then you're going to refresh all the forges on the board, which are places like this that the runes have already been taken from. You place another rune there so they can be taken again later. Then also the builder of the monument is going to gain one priest from every area right here that you control with a temple. And that's one of the ways you get priests. The other way is, earlier I said how you can build a temple up here with Jotunheim. There you can get a priest as well. And that is how you get those priests that you will eventually send to monuments to kind of patch your stats. And then you're going to draw and resolve an event card over there. When you draw these event cards, they're going to bring different monsters onto the board, and they're going to also activate the monsters that are there. Okay, so here's how you hunt a monster. We're going to take on Dragur right here, and this is his card. So what's going to happen first off, when you begin, the hero is going to draw up to combat cards according to their might, and then the person controlling the monster is going to grab two and use one of them. And here's what a monster attack card looks like. There's going to be a value here. This is the main value that matters to you because this is what you have to block. So you have to block 3, or you can block this entire thing with a shield card. So there's 3, and here are the cards. So if I were to go ahead, I could use, say I could use these 2 1s if I wanted to, and add it to my attribute over here. That would put me above 3, or also these cards have a weak spot value, this one right here. If I ever hit 8 on this, I would then be able to draw a second card. So, but instead, I'm just going to use this shield. That shield is going to then just go ahead and block this card. So the bottom of this does not activate. And now we go on to the hero, or the hero phase. So the hero is going to be able to draw a card, and 2 if you got the weak spot. And now is where you can start doing your retaliation damage to the monster. Notice these icons here. I have got to play cards that match these icons. For example, I could play this card. That icon matches this. I'll place my token here. I would also get this benefit, a rune. And there we go, that's one step closer to beating him. I then play all these icons, and I can defeat the monster. Or I can then play as much as I can, and then enter a second round of combat, hoping that I can then, in the second round, do this. I can also then end the combat. If I've done at least 1 wound, I can end the combat and hopefully come back and kill him off later. But that is how you hunt a monster. And if you kill them, you will also get their artifact, which is usually something very good to use later in the game. So that is the monster hunting phase. Okay, so in addition to fighting other monsters, you can also fight other players. So, for example, if this blue player moved in here, he's going to go ahead and battle the person here. And every army has got a value. This guy right here, that army's value is 2, and this one is a 3. So if this battle took place here, it would be 3 versus 2, blue would win. However, each player gets to play combat cards that will modify that. For example, this combat card, if it was played, it would add 1. So if the red player added this, their value would now be 3. There are also different modifiers down here as well. So you're going to keep playing combat cards, raising your value, and then at the end, you're going to compare both of your numbers, blue side versus red side, taking the value here of your armies, plus any combat cards, any other modifiers you have as far as artifacts or any other things that could modify that, and then have a winner or a losing side. And the losing side is going to then take casualties. And casualties is you're going to have to take 1 casualty on each of your armies, lowering that number. And you're also going to get casualties for any card you played with that symbol right there. Then after you do that, you then have to retreat, and you can leave the winner to take control of that region. The winner too would also take casualties for any icons that they have drawn like this. and then they would take control of the region. And that is how PvP battling takes place. Okay, so finally, how do you win the game? Well, there's a thing on win conditions, see if I can get that focused on here. But the win conditions pretty much are, first of all, you control all regions in 3 lands. So 3 entire lands, which is really hard to do. Also, you can control 5 regions with temples, or in like a 2-player game here, you would do 4 regions with temples. And then there's a Slayer where you have to kill 2 monsters and then the boss, which in this case is Loki, or with 2 players would be 1 monster and then the boss. And then finally Ragnarok, which we mentioned you check for over here when you go ahead and build the temple, and that is where you're going to go ahead and check to make sure the 3rd Ragnarok prerequisite's here, and then at the end everybody plays another round, and whoever has the most regions right here in the center around Yggdrasil wins the game. And those are the 4 ways you can win Lords of Ragnarok. Again, that's a very quick overview, but that's pretty much a quick and easy how to play the game. Let's send it back and see what we thought about it. Okay, so there we go. That is a very quick overview of Lords of Ragnarok.
It might not even be that quick, but non-detailed.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't even that quick. I thought, it's going to be very quick. I could do this in 4 or 5 minutes. I think it was like 10 minutes just to get most stuff in there.
Sure. So obviously that's going to be an initial complaint, right? But I think a lot of people understand when you come into an Awakened Realms game, if you come into Nemesis, if you come into the Great Wall,
right,
for example, you're not going to have what one would call a streamlined experience. This is not a Days of Wonder game, right? So is it fair to have those be criticisms when it's just kind of what the game is? I do think it's fair. I think it's fair
too,
when you think a game could have been just as exciting, but smoother.
Smooth is going to be like the key word for me throughout this review too, and it's just they don't feel consolidated, smooth, easy to get into. Awakened Realms, I think, sometimes has that thing where you play it initially and you finally wrap your brain around all these different branching paths on the rules, and then you get it, and you're like, okay, I got it. But if you shelf it for too long, you're probably not going to get it back out again.
I agree. One thing I think they did very well in this game, in terms of production, the production is huge and bombastic. It looks amazing. That type of stuff very seldom impresses me in a game, right? The amount of miniatures, the fact that you put those monuments together, you stack them up, that's fine, right? I think that they did
pretty cool.
It's good, right?
It is, yeah.
It doesn't speak to my taste in games. Right. But what I do appreciate is that for a game this complicated, they have 3 player aids for you, and those player aids walk you through each of the phases. I think that is a positive side of it.
It is.
The negative of it being you're constantly going like, where is the runes actually? So you're kind of flipping these player aids over and over. But I think they are well-made player aids.
They are, and that's what I do, because I gripe about player aids all the time, and so I'm not going to say, I do wish they were bigger, and there's like 2 sides, but the fact they exist for everybody, that's a huge, huge thing, because this game, it would not be functional without those player aids.
No. Absolutely not.
It would not be playable.
Well, because you have to worry about your own, like a regular turn structure, which is 5 phases, which touches almost every aspect of the game. Heroes and soldiers and runes and all these things. There's 5 like distinct phases, and the last of which is basically do a worker placement action that in almost any other game that would be the player phase.
Right. That is, I mean, you have to go through 5 phases to get to what is that action wheel, which is what feels like the heart of the game.
Sure.
But it takes you a while to get there, because you've got the prayer phase, rune phase, move phase, and all this. All right, so talk about those phases. Does it bother you at all? It bothers me a little bit that, I guess it goes back to smoothness and how streamlined it is, that you can move from several different ways in the game. Whether you're movement or whether I think they have maneuver and all this. So it seems like that right there, it's a little bit chaotic.
I agree, but I find that I actually like it.
Really?
I enjoy that there is, in the phases of the game, like I say, you touch a little bit of everything. You can move one troop, one of your armies, guaranteed, right, during one of the phases of the game, the maneuver phase. And then you do your worker placement action, or the wheel selection action. And one of those could be then move all of your troops, right? So you're talking about there's multiple ways. Or during the rune phase, maybe you could pay a rune to have a special effect.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot of ways to accomplish the same thing. I think that speaks to the fact that it lacks a little bit of cleanness, but it lets you be clever in how you're playing.
Yes, and I agree with that. But there is so much going on as far as, because I played with a couple guys that are they're game designers, so they really know games. Even they were like, there's a lot that goes into this, you know, and all the moving parts. One thing I can see that as a problem with this in most Awaken Realm games, I guess, if you suffer from AP, this game could be completely debilitating.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just because you have 6, 7 phases on every single round, and it's like you could not move forward with this game.
Right. I could see this game grinding to a halt.
Right.
There's a lot of things that happen. I think in the overview you didn't even touch on things like the blessings draft.
No,
right?
I did not.
Right. If you build a certain number of temples, that lead player gets to draw a number of cards +1, or number of players +1 blessing cards, and choose a power that they will keep for the rest of the game, and then hand the rest of them to the other players to then draft. That's once again, that's like throwing a third of Blood Rage into this game, where you have to draft these power cards, and right? So there's that phase alone, which isn't even a normal phase of the game. It's a specialty thing that gets triggered on the side of another action that could be triggered in a few different ways. You know what I mean? That can kind of grind this to a halt. Or you could be in a game where I think that this goes smoother and people say, yeah, let's try this, that looks fun, and go along. I think this game can play kind of quick. I've only played this, and I will speak only for myself, I've only played this with 2 players.
Right.
And I think that eliminates a lot of those issues. I can't imagine playing this with 4.
It doesn't. I have played with 4, I played with 3, I played with 2. And I will say playing with 2, I think I told you this, changed my view of the game. Because 2 is really probably the only way I would ever play this game. Now, I might play with 3 if everyone's played before. I don't know if I'd ever play with 4 again. But 2 is just, it's very punchy, it's very quick, and you keep moving. And also, another part of it is, when you build that monument, everyone else gets a chance to hit that monument. It's less punishing at 2. Because if you build it at 4, by the time it's your turn again, both those spaces are taken as the priest, right?
There's very few places to put, there's only 2, right, per monument?
Right.
And that doesn't scale on player count.
No, it does not. So
that's rough.
Yeah, and that's pretty brutal right there. But 2, again, it's the board is smaller, the winning conditions change a little bit, but I feel like it's better. Now, let's go into the winning conditions. That's another thing when there are 4 ways to win this. This is barely an area control game, because I know it's kind of bid as area control, and there is control of regions and stuff. But unless you're going for that win condition specifically, it's almost secondary, and it's probably the least fun thing to do.
Are you talking about try to control every region of 3 lands?
Yeah, that's just impossible. That winning condition right there shouldn't exist.
I think that must be a rule that basically says, don't let someone steamroll the map if you are trying to go for the hunt win condition, the hunt and kill Loki.
Right, I agree.
Because, and I know, this is either a complaint or a feature of the game, right, depending on your viewpoint. What your hero is doing, your hero is going around collecting runes and hunting monsters and stuff, and he has no part, almost, of the area control whatsoever. You can do the usurp action, and he then can affect the area control. But it's your soldiers, it's your armies. Your hero's kind of playing a separate game for the most part.
Yes.
And so if I'm going heavy with the hero, trying to hunt down all the beasts, and you're just kind of, storming the lands, I could see maybe that's how you could get that first win condition, the control 90% of the map.
I guess, because you're right, and that didn't bother as much as it did me. The fact that, you're right, the heroes are playing a different game, more of an overlay on yours, to the point that your armies can just walk right by them. And it's just because they're doing their own thing. They're looking for runes, hunting monsters, and then usurping. It's like, it's completely unattached, it seems like. There's certain overlaps, but for the most part, they're doing a different game.
Yeah, so could you imagine just the armies, like marching by, and they're like, oh, is that Beowulf? Yeah, but he's fighting a snake. Leave him alone! No!
But also, did it bother you? This is something, these are like minor gripes, but your hero is the same size as your army mini.
But it's the same color,
Right.
as the neutral monsters and the statues that you're building, the monuments, it's messy on the board.
It is.
All right, so I don't want to get too sidetracked. We're talking about win conditions.
Yes, win conditions.
That first win condition, the control the lands, that must be basically you can't not play the area control game and let someone else do it.
Yeah, the other person, I know there's another channel that did a talk about Ragnarok, and they mentioned the fact that it's just if the other person was dead or not existent, you could win. I don't know how that. Now the second one, Ragnarok, that will be triggered because of all the win conditions, and it's area control around Yggdrasil, the one in the middle.
Yes.
And then the third one is controlling regions with the temple, which is honestly the way the majority of our games have finished, by controlling those temple territories, because you can kind of steamroll in there and take those over and you get that win. But then there's the slaying a monster, or two monsters if there's 3 to 4 players, and then beating Loki, which is virtually impossible.
Virtually, you say?
Because Chris did it.
I did do it.
But to his defense, to his offense, I guess.
Offend me.
I was really rooting for him, because it was really we're going to see if we can do this. Because
you weren't giving me free passage, though.
No.
You were one turn away from controlling the 4 temples requisite in a 2-player game, right?
Right. And I could have gotten more of the requisites, I think, if I would have taken these sides and gotten us closer to Ragnarok. But I could have been a bit more aggressive on that. But what surprised me is the fact that you could actually beat, because my big thing is, I don't even know if you can actually get to Loki, because Loki, the way you beat him, he heals every time. You have to do all that damage in one fail swoop.
You within one combat, right?
Right, combat.
You can have multiple rounds of combat, but but it's risky to continue to hunt that long because you'll run out the monster deck.
Right.
It is its whole own phase. That could have been a 10-minute explanation, right?
It is, and because you fought the monsters, you fought Loki, all that. Now, there's a disconnect that maybe wouldn't bother you. This whole hand limit thing, I think it's wisdom or something that makes the combat hard, the combat hand limit, how many combat cards you have. That just disappears when you fight a monster.
That doesn't bother me because you're investing then in your might track. Of the 3 tracks, right? One is your hand limit from round to round, I view it.
And then you bring your might in.
You can, if you upgrade your might, you can exceed that hand limit for a battle. It's kind of the adrenaline, the rush of battle.
Yeah.
Right? You have a lot more in your hand. And that's the only way that I was able to defeat Loki, was I had to run those tracks up as high as I could, as quick as I could, because if you're trying to hunt down the beasts, and if you're trying to do the temples and stuff, you have to run it. You have to gun for it, because Ragnarok will happen. I think that is, I think that's a neat feature of the game, that the game should not run too long in terms of number of rounds. How long each round is depends on players.
Right.
But number of rounds, number of turns that everybody gets, it shouldn't last that long, because those Ragnarok timers will start flipping over, and then boom, you have 1 round left to control the areas around the circle, around Yggdrasil. I think that's a smart feature. I don't know if it's implemented perfectly. And once again, in a 2-player game, if you're hunting for Loki, you have to crush 1 monster, and then you go to Loki. In a 4-player game, you have to defeat 2 monsters first. And that doesn't seem like it's proper scaling, per se.
No, I don't think it's possible at all in a 3 to 4 player game, because of beating 2 monsters then Loki. By the time those other prerequisites are done, I think that's going to trigger first. Even a 2-player game, you can fast track that, because if I see someone going for Loki, you can just hurry up and trigger those things and get them going to go with Ragnarok. But it is possible. Chris showed me that.
Yes, but in the games where Ragnarok does trigger, right, if you are, let's say that you're so close to defeating Loki and doing that whole strategy, that's out the window now.
Yeah.
You can't do it, and now you have to focus back to area control around Yggdrasil. And so that's part of the problem is defeating Loki feels like it's 100% or nothing, right? If you go all in and that doesn't work out by the time Ragnarok triggers, you probably have diverted so much attention to leveling up your monster hunting that you haven't leveled up your other stat that you need to put troops out to have better other combats out on the board. But I love a game that does have competing priorities. I think this is why this game works at 2 players, because you're constantly worried about how close are you on temples, how close am I on Loki.
Right.
If neither of us hit those, how close are we to Ragnarok, and how am I doing on those spaces right around it?
And you have to spread yourself so thin on a lot of these too, because you want to consolidate your troops so you're more powerful going in. However, you're going to leave everything you've just taken care of unprotected, and people can just walk in and take it.
Right.
So there's that give and take right there. That on a 2-player game isn't as bad because the board is smaller. Obviously, there's only one other player, but on 3 or 4, it's brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that my view is a little bit limited because I've only played this with 2 players so far, and I don't even know if I want to change that. I don't know if I want to play this with more. When I come back to it, it'll probably be with 2 players again.
I think I probably would too. Now, a couple of things I want to mention too. Rulebook, it's like they kind of wanted to make it concise and short, and it left a lot of questions. It could be a lot more clear. That's the thing. I mean, obviously the whole game could be streamlined, but I think the rulebook could be a lot better because there are questions afterwards. Something else too, Waking Realms does on this is I feel like there needs to be more in there because Loki is the only kind of boss in the base game. I would like to see more variety in there as far as that goes. And I know there are expansions.
I assume it has to be in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they refer to a lot of stuff as the boss instead of just Loki.
Right.
So I'm guessing there's other variety.
There are more expansions and things. There's a lot more, I think.
Okay, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. So, okay, so this is the dudes of the map. Obviously miniatures are great.
Sure.
Right?
It needs to be, right? Because that's kind of the central focus. I wish it were clearer.
Yes.
And even playing on the 2-player side of the map, which has more breathing room, stuff gets congested.
It does. It does. And your whole board can get there. All right, so now let's go down to scores. I'll go ahead and go first. This one, okay, now before I go into that, this has a weird dynamic because like I said, I played it initially with a guy, he's a game designer, and his girlfriend and somebody else, and we played it, and we did not have a great time at all. But we all thought about it and wanted to play it again. So we played it again, I think the same day or the next day, and even his girlfriend was not having a great time, but she is willing to play it again. So it's one of those that, and even when you and I played the 2-player game the first time, as we left, we had to stop halfway through it. Mm-hmm. We both were thinking about it. We're like, huh. And it kind of sits there and marinates, and you want to dive into it a bit more, and you kind of embrace the imperfections of it.
Right.
I felt like I just really wanted to dive in a bit more to it. I don't know if it's the board, if it's everything that gets it. So, okay, so taking all that into account, I think this could be streamlined a lot. I kind of wish it was spend a bit more time in the oven and they play tested some of these things out and worked on the smoothness. But I do enjoy where it's trying to go. It's got some great ideas. I don't think it's quite there, but I think what it has is worth the play, especially at 2 players. So I'm coming in on this one at a 6.5, which is honestly higher than I thought I'd be because that 2 players brought it up. I don't know how often it would hit the table because I want to know if that experience it gives me warrants the amount of setup, the amount of time, the amount of everything that goes into this. So I don't know, but I think it is. The minis are great. So yeah, I give this a 6.5.
I really struggle on the score because this could swing low, this could swing high, and I think how much fun you have in your games is really going to flavor that depending on the time. I'm going to come in score-wise at a 7.
Okay. Wow.
Because I think that there's not a lot of area control games that work so well with 2 players. It is a shame that there's basically 3 and 4 players worth of stuff in here that I don't think I really ever want to touch. Mm-hmm. I think you said it earlier, maybe 3 players that all know what they're doing, but I think that it feels like the scaling of the end game objectives, the scaling of the triggering of Ragnarok, all that works very well with 2. And I've also seen plenty of people say that they really enjoy this solo. So not that many area control games work well at these low player counts. I think that that's impressive. I have fun with it. Like you said, it sits with me. I still sit there, think about those hunt phases. I think about what combat is going to, okay, what would I do in this situation? What would combat be like with this if I was fighting for that area? How many cards do I hold back? How much do I invest? I think that the combat, though not the smoothest, is fun, but man, that hunting is so much fun. And I think that it's one of those games I'll probably just continue to hunt monsters, even if it's a losing strategy, just because it's that fun to do. I really love that idea of investing cards, blocking them, trying to draw extra cards to be able to then go through and take out all of their spots. Maybe I wish there was less game around it, and it was just like a big monster hunting game, because that part is so enjoyable.
It is.
And yet, it also has good area control, and it has good different decisions. So, with its flaws, understanding those flaws, it's not higher. I am giving this a very qualified 7, in that if you're looking for a great 2-player area control game, I think that this might be it. So there you go.
I agree. And honestly, for me, I can see this going up, because again, I feel like I want to play it again. So that is the seal of approval right here from Chris 7. So that is Lords of Ragnarok. If you like area control, if you like Vikings, if you like great minis, or if you like Euros,
Apparently.
give it a try. So, all right. Thank you guys. I'm Joey Evans.
And I'm Chris Yee.
Go out there and trigger Ragnarok. It's a bad thing, isn't it?
Probably not.
Okay.